Thank you very much. We'll resume now our hearing here of the Commission on Election Administration. And we are very, very pleased to have a panel here of very distinguished experts who have closely studied, collected data, and provided very sophisticated analysis of a number of the issues that the Commission has been charged by the President with looking into. And we'll begin with Steve Ansolabehere, professor at Harvard University, and appreciate, Steve, your being with us. Thank you, and proceed.
Between us and lunch, so I think me and my colleagues will go quickly through our presentations. I'm here to speak on registration systems, and I've submitted a white paper that goes along with this presentation. I'm not going to follow the white paper as closely as possible.
That's fine. I do want to repeat for the public and also for those following us on the webcast that all of the documents that are going to be submitted here, that is going to be the base of the testimony today, will be posted to the website at www.supportthevoter.gov. So all of that will be available in short order. Thank you. Go ahead, Steve.
The registration system is really the backbone of the election administration system. It is used in all aspects of the operations of the election office, from setting up precincts, determining how many precincts to have, where people vote, what kind of ballots are to be assigned to which voter, and so forth. Where ballots are to be sent when there's an absentee request, where information is to be sent to voters about where to vote, when to vote, and how. Registration is also vitally important to political campaigns, so anything that's done in the registration system has big ripple effects outside of the election administration domain. The people who engage in get out the vote activities by the political parties, candidates, and other groups rely very heavily on the lists to manage their communications activities. So it's very important not only to the election administration but to the entire conduct of elections and the operation of elections. I would like to highlight 4 aspects of registration in the United States to get our conversation started. First, from my perspective, there's been considerable improvement in the registration system since 2000. I became deeply involved in this area of research after the 2000 election, and so it's been interesting to follow what has happened. And consider one indicator that the Census Bureau uses to measure registration rates and reasons for non-registration and non-voting. This is from the Current Population Survey, and the Current Population Survey asks of all reported non-voters in the CPS why they did not vote. They give various categories, and one of the categories is I encountered a registration problem. In 2000, 6.9% of non-voters reported that the reason that they didn't vote was a registration problem. By 2012, that had fallen to 5.5%. It's a significant drop in statistical terms. The difference between 6.9% and 5.5% corresponds to roughly 1.2 million votes. So that's a big improvement in terms of number of votes affected. That said, 5.5% of non-voters still represents 4.8 million people. So if we're thinking about standards, quantitative things to focus on, if we can get that 5.5% figure down further, every couple percent we shave off there are a couple million voters. It's an important metric to follow at a national level. Second, there have been 4 significant innovations in the registration world since 2000. First was the introduction of statewide voter registration lists, which was required in the Help America Vote Act. Thank you, Charles. Here, I'll give you that. In 2000, there was one state, Michigan, that had fully implemented such a system. It was a model for the other states. Oh, you guys, Kentucky, sorry. I didn't realize you guys were all the way up and running at that point. By 2006, however, every state was required under HAVA, and I think there were only a couple states that had not successfully implemented the system, and now every state has a statewide voter registration system. This has helped enormously in managing systems, facilitating communication among the counties and between the counties. Second big improvement, which is not a governmental improvement, is the development of national voter registration lists in the United States. These are maintained by private firms such as the firm Catalyst. They take all of the voter registration lists from the counties and the states. They merge them together. They manage them as if they were official lists, and they're used for communications purposes by campaigns and groups. I think there are enormous lessons to be learned in studying these lists for developing best practices, finding indicators for how to improve, finding specific problems, finding areas within the country where there are specific problems and lists, and targeting those lists. Third, there have been tremendous advances in technology outside of the election domain, specifically in managing extremely large databases and how to merge those databases together with other databases to come up with improvements. Some of these technologies verge on problems and breaches of privacy, but many of them, most of them, I think, have been, on the whole, positive changes. For example, 10 years ago, the thought of managing 1 terabyte of data was impossible. Fourth is state laws have changed, opening up the lists. Today, 17 states offer online registration. In 2002, the first state to adopt that was Arizona. Since 2009, the other 16 states have come on board. This is a very rapidly changing area, and I expect this is only going to continue to grow. The other area in which this is evident is same-day registration. Back in 2000, there were only, I think, 5 or 6 states that had same-day registration. We're up to 11. And 3 states, North Carolina, Ohio, and Maryland, allow same-day registration when you vote early. So it's really 14 states now that are offering some sort of same-day registration, some way for voters to self-manage their registration lists. Third major point to take away is that the registration system, although we talk about it as many different systems, is actually one enormous system that happens to be managed in a highly decentralized way. It's a 20 million record system that corresponds to 1 terabyte of data. And there are various aspects of that system. Nearly everybody who's eligible to register is registered. 88% of the eligible citizen voting age population in the United States is registered. So we're doing a good job getting people in. There's probably some further improvement to be made in that. It's then what happens to those registration records once they're used. It's a very decentralized system. There are 8,000 election offices in the United States that deal with this system, that have to work with it. Most of them are county offices, but there are also some states like New England, Michigan, and Wisconsin that have town-level registration, so you have many small jurisdictions dealing with this. The election office is the point of contact for registration for most, in most of the systems that we use, though there are also the voter registration offices or facilities tied to DMVs and so forth. And the use of these lists is highly decentralized. There are 186,000 precincts in the United States, so once the state has developed a statewide registration list, the data is then redistributed to those 186,000 precincts. And finally, it's highly varied. The 160 most populous counties in the United States handle half of all registrations. The remaining 2,900 counties have the other 95 million records. It's a very different world between the very big population counties and the small population counties and even small towns. The smallest list is 115 people. Right? You don't need a massive technology to deal with that county's registration list. LA County has 4.6 million records. You have to have considerable computing power, staff, and sophistication to deal with LA County's registration records. Fourth point, and this really goes to the reason that the lists are difficult to manage, is that people move. Right? That is the main cause of registration problems or registration complexity. The lists are static. We think of all registered voters on a given day or all registered voters in a given election. But in fact, people move continually, and we heard some of the problems with that. I think the military is an excellent example of an extreme end of the severity of people moving around even day to day. 12% of Americans change residences every year. So in about a 4-year period, half of all Americans move. Right? So between presidential elections, half of the people have churned over in terms of their residences and therefore where they are supposed to vote. The population mobility creates two kinds of errors, and these are another criteria you might think about focusing on. Those are errors that are false positives and errors that are false negatives. False positives are people who were left on the lists who shouldn't have been, say because they moved or died. And the false negatives are records that were dropped from the list but shouldn't have been dropped or were not correctly recorded when they should have been recorded differently. There are, and the white paper goes into this, there are different ways in which we might think about how to manage false positives and false negatives using various indicators that are now becoming available from statistical analysis of these lists. And I think this is an important area to think about making improvements. When we think about duplicate records on lists now, for example, we have measures from Catalyst and other firms of how frequent such duplicates are. I think the election administrators are doing a fairly good job nationwide. It's not uniformly true, but fairly good job in managing lists from this perspective. The number of duplicates is only about 8 to 9% on the lists now. In other words, the election officials manage somehow to keep ahead of the annual rate of change in the population. But how can you improve further on that target? Can we somehow minimize those errors? And that's, I think, the big challenge, which is how do we make the next steps in minimizing and identifying those errors. And the three big points to take away, I think, are first, technology can be very helpful, especially in the big list areas. Second, self-management is an emerging trend that is going to really continue to change the list over the next decade or two. And finally, as with all systems, all aspects of the system, is adaptation. That is, the system learns. People learn from other people what to do, what works. They apply it, it works or it doesn't, and they keep the technology innovation or they don't. And those are the three things that I think we should focus on and talk further about. But I will pass the gavel now to Charles.
Welcome.
Let's see. Oh, I'm on, so I now need my slides. And while we're waiting for my slides to pop up,